Hi, Thomas Heimann here, founder and CEO of Realty Partners, and today I want to talk to you about listings. And especially I want to talk to you about buyer listings, but let's talk about sellers first. Let me ask you a question, and I want you to think about that. When was the last time that you worked with a seller and you said, okay, you know what, I'm going to print some postcards, I'm going to mail them out, I'm going to promote your listing, I'm going to promote your property, I'm going to put it on the internet, and if I find someone that's interested, then I'm going to come to you and then we'll talk about you paying me. Odds are you would never do that in a million years. Unfortunately, on the buyer side, that's exactly what over 95% of all agents are doing. They're working with buyers, they're working for buyers, they're setting up showings, they're showing properties, they're doing research, and they're investing a lot of the time and energy in working with buyers without having that buyer's commitment and loyalty. And that's really what the listing agreement is about on the seller side, is to get their commitment that they're going to use you and that you will get paid, period, end of story. As opposed to working with a buyer without any kind of agreement, and then they end up walking into a builder's model or walking into an open house, and before you know it, they end up buying something and you don't get paid. So there's a psychological barrier for some reason with most agents in requiring a buyer to sign a buyer agency agreement. And myself, I started using buyer agencies, and I actually took it a step further, and I'll tell you about that in a second, back in about 2004. And so since 2004, 2005, which we're talking about 9-10 years, I have not ever worked with a buyer without a buyer agency agreement. And actually, what I started doing is charging a retainer. Right now, we charge a $195 retainer, and that retainer is fully commissionable to the agent. It's fully refundable at closing, so it's fully earned right away. But at closing, the buyer gets that retainer back. In the past, I used to charge as much as $395 for a buyer retainer, and I didn't have any less of a sign-up rate than I do with $195 today. The question, of course, is, and that's where the mental barrier comes in, how can you get your buyer to agree to pay a buyer retainer? Nobody else is doing it. Nobody else is doing buyer agency. And obviously, when a buyer calls you, they're interested in some property, they're responding to your website. If you were to say, hey, I need to meet with you and you need to sign a buyer agency agreement and pay me $195 before I can work with you, well, you know what, let me just email you the buyer agency agreement and you can go ahead and send me back the information with your credit card number. If you did that, then nobody would be working with you. So it's all about creating value and building value. If you're a seasoned agent, odds are you are using a listing presentation when you go to a potential seller on your listing appointment. And you'll have a presentation where you show your marketing plan and what sets you apart and why they should list with you as opposed to the 5 other agents that they're interviewing. Because just the way the industry is set up and the way agents are set up mentally, it's an expectation. The seller's interviewing 3, 4, 5 agents, and so you have a kick-ass presentation to make sure that they're going to pick you. But on the buyer side, how many of you have a buyer presentation? And that's really the key. You have to have a buyer presentation that has to be just as knock your socks off, impactful, and powerful as your listing presentation. And the way the process works really is that you invite your buyer to meet with you in the office. You can say, listen, it's company policy. Our first meeting is always at the office. I don't know if you've seen the news coverage recently, but agents have been killed meeting strangers at properties, at houses. So our requirement, we signed up, we pledged that we will always meet the first time at the office. After that, we can meet at properties directly. So when is a good time to meet at the office? And then we'll go from there to look at the properties. And when they come to the office, say, listen, I would like to take just a few minutes, 5-10 minutes, to show you how we work, how our process works, and what makes us different from 99% of all the other agents out there in the marketplace. In my marketplace right now, there are over 5,000 realtor agents and over 10,000 licensed agents. And I'm sure if you're in a larger market than our market, we're in Sarasota, Manatee County, the numbers are probably even higher. And if that buyer has worked with other agents before, I guarantee you odds are they weren't shown a buyer side presentation. And then build your presentation and build that value. What makes you special? What is the value that you bring to the table? And at the end, the goal should be for them to want to work with you. And then the proposition is very easy. Listen, there's no cost to you for our services. We get paid by the seller. However, all we ask for is your loyalty. And this is how we work. We have a buyer agency agreement. We ask you to sign. If you're not happy for any reason, if you think my representation sucks, you can cancel it. Which is something, by the way, that I would also do with your listing presentations, with your listing agreements. I would put in an option that they can cancel. Very few, if any, will ever do so unless you really provide a horrible service. And then there's a $195 retainer, which is really just a token of your commitment, of your loyalty, and it's fully refunded to your closing. So it's just like a deposit. And leave it at that. If you do that, I guarantee you 9 out of 10 people will sign if you have a powerful buyer presentation. And those that don't want to commit to you, that don't want to give you their loyalty, are probably not worth spending any time with. You know, if you already set up a couple of showings, show to them, but then let them go. You know, I'm sorry, I can't work any further with you until we sign buyer agency. Those are just my thoughts on the subject, and I think they can save you a lot of grief. We put together a very powerful buyer presentation. We call it our VIP buyer program. And I've had that presentation probably going back almost 8-9 years now, and I have continuously updated and fine-tuned it. And we have a lot of performance guarantees in there. We have a home warranty guarantee. We even have a buyback guarantee. And so we train our agents on how to use that presentation to build massive value for the buyer, to then get them to want to work with us, and the buyer agency really takes care of itself. So I challenge you, take a look at your buyer presentation. If you don't have one, build one, make it just as powerful as your listing presentation, and then put a price tag on your time. And there has to be value to yourself that you are not able, you just cannot work with people that are not willing to make a commitment to you. Even if you're starting out and you're starving and you don't have any buyers at all to work with, pretend that you had buyers coming out of the woodworks, and you just do not have time to work with all of them. So you have to qualify them, and you have to ensure that they're committed to you. And you just have to build your business that way, even if you're just starting out, because you're much better off taking that time prospecting, even knocking on doors if you have to, than to work with buyers that are not willing to give you that commitment. Anyhow, that's it for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Thomas Heimann, founder and CEO of Realty Partners. Until next time.